Everyone that has joined us so far. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Nazarana Martha, and although her colleague Liesl Scheepers can't be with us today, they've been very innovative by creating a video that they will share with us while their presentation. And while Nazarana holds her position as the faculty head at the IEE's Varsity College, Liesl brings with her expertise as the manager of the online learning and teaching at the same college's online center. Thanks so much, colleagues. You've got 15 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Eugenie, and thank you everyone for joining the session. Welcome to the presentation titled Providing Feedback About Their Feedback, an analysis of participants' perceptions of feedback in an online learning environment. I'm Dr. Nazarana Martha, and my co-presenter is Liesl Scheepers, and we are both from the IIE's Varsity College online campus.
This presentation will be broken down into 4 sections. The introduction, which will provide a summary of what the study was all about, a review of the literature and the theoretical framework, the methodology of the study, which includes the research questions, data collection methods, and data analysis, and finally, the main findings of the study, the conclusions, and our recommendations. Feedback is one of the most powerful tools for teaching and learning, and providing meaningful feedback to students is of particular importance in an online context, as it offers a direct way for the facilitator to engage with their students and to provide them with individual, tailored support. Using a qualitative approach involving a series of 3 focus groups, 45 online facilitators affiliated to a South African-based private higher education institution were encouraged to share their understanding of what they believed constitutes meaningful feedback. During these engagements, it was found that every one of the individuals who participated in the study sincerely believed that their feedback was meaningful. Despite this, however, there were aspects of their practice that did not align with what the literature suggests about the nature of such feedback. In response to these findings, the researchers have made suggestions that may assist this and other higher education institutions in establishing a clearer understanding of what constitutes meaningful feedback and how their online facilitators may become more adept at the provision of same to their students. A study of the literature soon reveals enormous support for the idea that feedback is one of the single most powerful contributing factors to the academic success of students. For this feedback to be meaningful, however, it is essential that it meets certain standards, and achieving this is not always as straightforward as it may seem, with the quality of feedback often being impeded by time constraints, lack of experience, and facilitators not being properly versed in effective feedback practices. Another challenge noted in the literature is that even when efforts are made to develop new ways of providing feedback, facilitators can display a reluctance to adopt new processes, preferring instead to deliver feedback in the same way they have always done. While the importance of feedback in an educational context is certainly not a new topic for discussion, a review of the literature would suggest that, despite the growth in the provision of online education, the majority of the studies conducted have focused on feedback as it is provided and received across a multitude of face-to-face settings. This study hopes to address this apparent gap, at least in part, by engaging with online facilitators tasked with guiding the learning process in an online setting to determine their current practices and whether these align with what is suggested by the literature. For the purpose of the study, we have adopted the definition of feedback as proposed by Henderson et al. 2019, where feedback is seen as a process, where the learner makes sense of the performance-relevant information to promote their learning. The reason for selecting this definition is the suggestion that feedback in this context is a forward-looking process, rather than simply a means to justify a grade. It is this idea of feedback that is future-focused, that led us to select the Hattie and Timpley model as the basis for our theoretical framework. This will be addressed next. The reason for us having selected this model is twofold. Firstly, it is one of the few models that includes the notion of feedback as having a feed-forward function. And secondly, the model includes an additional perspective that differentiates between feedback that is delivered on the task, the process, self-regulation, and the self, or the person. Following the Hattie and Timpley framework, meaningful feedback begins with 3 critical questions. What are the goals? Am I on track? Where am I going next? Each of these questions are posed at 4 levels: feedback on task, feedback on process, feedback on self-regulation, feedback on the person. Feedback on task is concerned with how well a student has understood and or performed the task, while feedback on process will address strategy or perhaps whether the correct tools have been used to complete the task. The third level of feedback relies on self-monitoring or self-regulation. This is feedback that looks at the choices students have made that have shaped their own learning. Finally, feedback on the person is associated with the student's personal qualities and providing positive affirmations, such as complimenting them on their turn of phrase, or perhaps commenting on their attention to detail. I will now hand you over to my colleague who will address the research methodology.
The purpose of the study was to explore online facilitators' understandings and perceptions about the nature of meaningful feedback. The aim of the study was therefore to explore any gaps that may exist between the participants' notion of what constitutes meaningful feedback and what literature shares on the topic. By identifying these gaps, the researchers hope to use any gaps in understanding and investigate and implement possible interventions to support the online facilitators with providing meaningful feedback to their students. This study sought to address the following key research questions. What are online facilitators' understanding of meaningful feedback? How do online facilitators perceive meaningful feedback? What gaps, if any, exist in online facilitators' understanding of meaningful feedback? For this study, a qualitative exploratory case study was adopted. By engaging with online facilitators affiliated to this private higher education institution, the researchers were able to gain insights into their perceptions regarding the notion of what constitutes meaningful feedback and how they provide same to their students. To collect data for this study, an initial online qualitative survey was administered to the entire population of online facilitators. Using content analysis, the data from the surveys were reduced and analyzed. Thereafter, the research used purposive sampling to identify participants for the study. In this way, they were able to identify participants who possessed the required characteristics and experiences, such as age, gender, and tenure, to make them a fit for the study. The final groups of online facilitators who participated in the study numbered 45, which was 69% of the total population. To gain in-depth insights into their experiences and perceptions of feedback, and to allow for interaction among the participants, they were invited to participate in any one of 3 focus groups. Both researchers were present at the focus groups, but they were facilitated by one researcher. All focus groups took place fully online using the Microsoft Teams platform to accommodate the fact that participants resided in different parts of the country. After transcribing the focus group recordings verbatim, content analysis was used to analyze the data. That data was reduced using codes, and those codes were used to generate themes. Each researcher completed this analysis independently, and after meeting to discuss the themes that were generated, the analysis was conducted again independently to assist with clarification and defining and naming themes. This is the spreadsheet that was used to collect data and to analyze and sort the data into themes. During the focus groups, participants were asked to share how they approached the provision of feedback to their students and why they believed their practices resulted in feedback that was meaningful. From these engagements and the subsequent analysis of the data, the following themes emerged. Praise the process, not the person. Tasks and process take precedence. Feed forward is understood but not necessarily practiced. Aligning with traditional views of providing feedback. The findings from this study provide valuable insights into the current practices of online facilitators regarding feedback provision to their students. 4 key themes emerged from the focus group discussions. The first theme highlights the preference for praising participants' processes rather than personal attributes, in line with Dweck's framework. Participants emphasized the importance of feedback that focused on students' approaches, strategies, and efforts. This aligns with Hattie and Temperley's distinction between person-level and process feedback, with the latter fostering a growth mindset. The second theme emphasizes the importance of providing specific, detailed feedback on students' task performance and strategies they employed. This approach aligns with Hattie's differentiation between task-level feedback, which is focused on content, and process-level feedback, which is focused on strategies. Despite the understanding of feed-forward concepts, the participants rarely implemented this practice in their feedback routines. Feed-forward is designed to give students forward-looking guidance for future performance. However, barriers such as time constraints and doubts about effectiveness hindered its use. Similar challenges with implementing feedback were reported in other studies, indicating broader issues across educational practices. The final theme addresses the participants' reliance on more traditional views of feedback, which often misaligns with theoretical models of effective feedback, such as those proposed by Henderson and Hattie and Temperley. The reluctance to adopt feed-forward practices suggests an area for development. Finding ways to integrate feed-forward into feedback practices through different platforms and methods could significantly improve the quality and effectiveness of feedback provided to students. In a time where online learning has become an integral component of higher education learning and teaching, and considering the pivotal nature that feedback plays, especially in online learning environments, in improving student performance, there exists a necessary focus on providing students with feedback that is truly effective. As stated by Hattie and Temperley, there is a greater chance of feedback being considered meaningful when it not only addresses the task that was undertaken and the tools or strategies used to undertake that task, but also provides the student with logical connections for improvement of future tasks. All the participants in this study communicated a confidence in their ability to provide their students with meaningful feedback. While their commitment to the feedback process may be commendable, it can be concluded that there was nonetheless a clear disconnect between their intentions and the benchmark criteria, as set out in the framework which guided the study. The findings provide the perfect opportunity for training and to conduct further research into strategies regarding the use of Hattie and Temperley's framework as a foundation for modeling best practice in an online distance learning setting. These online facilitators understand meaningful feedback as feedback that emphasizes students' processes and strategies rather than personal attributes. Meaningful feedback is further understood to be comments, rubrics, and overall feedback provided by the online facilitator. A shift in understanding is needed so that feedback is better suited to Gen Z students and online teaching and learning. Meaningful feedback is perceived as detailed, specific, and focused on task requirements and strategies, ensuring that students understand their successes and areas for improvement. They use the correct terminology when describing what feedback should entail, but due to time and other constraints, their practice does not always align with their beliefs about their practice. A significant gap exists in the implementation of feed-forward practices, despite an understanding of its importance. Barriers such as time constraints and doubts about its effectiveness hinder its adoption. A further gap that exists is in relation to how to shift from monologic to dialogic feedback and to provide feedback using different platforms and methods. Motivated by the findings of the study, there exists a need to conduct further research that interrogates how a model like that of Hattie Timperley can be applied in practice. Adding to this, the study foregrounded the urgent need to design and implement training and support of this for online facilitators. As such, the researchers will embark on a follow-up study wherein interventions will be explored and implemented, and online facilitators will be invited to share their thoughts and experiences of these interventions intended to support them in the provision of meaningful feedback. Another consideration for further study is to give voice to the students to gain insight into their perceptions and experiences about feedback. A further area of study could be the exploration of how the advancement of ChatGPT and artificial intelligence tools can be effectively leveraged to make the feedback process more effective in terms of quality and time. These are the references that were consulted to compile this presentation. Thank you for attending this presentation.
Thanks so much, Dr. Nazarana. I'm happy to see that we had quite a number of participants join us in the room, 22 to be exact. Colleagues, we now have the opportunity to ask questions, or perhaps there's something you would like to comment on. So you are welcome to raise your hand or to type in the chat pane for us. Let's perhaps give a few seconds for anyone that would like to speak or ask a question.
Thank you, Dr. Eugenie.
Perhaps as the participants think of questions, I was wondering something that I came across as a postgraduate student myself. When we draw our sample, I was advised that we no longer distinguish between the gender and so on. What was your experience of that? Because I heard in the video that it was mentioned that you also collected data on the gender of your participants. Do you maybe have any views on that?
It wasn't a parameter as such for the study. It was just mentioned that we had a fully representative sample. So that's why we just mentioned different ages, different levels of tenure and experience, gender, just to show that it was a fully representative sample. So one of the parameters of the study was not based on gender. It was just general.
Thanks so much. And then actually the other question that I had, but you addressed it towards the end of the video, was actually how we can harness AI to support us with the time constraints that we sometimes experience in providing students with constructive feedback. But I think we've had actually a lot of insights over the last 2 days about how we can go about doing that.
Yes, and I'm absolutely excited about the potential of AI for helping us, provide feedback to students, helping us with marking, because very often we spend such a lot of time marking and providing feedback. Sometimes the feedback is compromised, and then sometimes the teaching and learning might become compromised. So if we have tools to support with that, that's wonderful, like automated quiz, but, more than that. So I'm very excited about that space.
I couldn't agree more. Tammy has also commented and said, well done, feedback is such an important aspect of teaching and learning. I couldn't agree more, Tammy. When it comes to learning and teaching at the universities, our students definitely benefit a lot, especially if we've got individualized feedback to really help them to make improvements and focus on the areas that they have strengths, but also then the areas where they can improve. Thank you so much, everyone, especially to the presenters. In her absence, we also thank your colleague Liesl for her contributions. This then brings us to the end of this session, and I hope that I will see everyone during the self-care session that starts at 13:25. Thank you.